Hi, it's Tess Marshall from The Bold Life here, and I'm going to interview my daughter Christy, who's physically challenged, and she's going to talk to us about how that relates to being afraid. So, Christy, welcome.
Thanks, Mom.
Why don't we talk about how you've experienced fear and the fear of not being accepted because of your physical challenge?
Well, I think that whether it was dating, a job, a friendship, any new experience where somebody had never met me before, there was always a fear, a big fear of them not liking me because of my hand and because I was different.
And so, how'd you handle that? How'd you handle that anxiety, nervousness? Like, it must have been hard every time you've met somebody new.
Well, I think I found out that in elementary school, hiding my hand didn't work very well. It was typically dyed the color of my jeans that I was wearing.
Because you were hiding them where?
In my pocket. And you would ask me, did you hide your hand today? And I'd tell you no, but I couldn't explain why it was dyed red or green, the color of my jeans. But I hid my hand all through college, middle school, and high school, even dating. And there was always an awkward moment where I had to face the fear head on because you had to have a conversation eventually if somebody wanted to hold your hand.
And so you would go out with people, meet them, and they had no idea. And then at some point on the date, it was discovered.
It was often discovered because they wanted to hold my hand on the right side. And my strategy was to keep them on the left side.
That worked.
But the laws of the universe don't always go with what my own ego would like them to do. So I would have to stop in my tracks. And then I would go into the story. And it would be my story, and it was often awkward. And, you know, at the end of the conversation, they weren't running the other direction. In fact, I've never had a friend leave me or a guy that I was dating leave because I only had one hand. I think that, you know, we live in a very judgmental society where image is important, body physique is important, and so when you have a physical difference on the outside, you know, that becomes even a greater fear that you're not living up to the expectations of what one's wants you to live up to.
So then really you just faced it by going through it.
Yes.
And so now, years later as an adult, and you're married and everything, now how does it today, having a stub for a right hand, how is that in your work life?
You know, I do call my hands stubs, as do every grade school friend that I have. My husband has learned to admire stubs. It's almost like another personality for me, but it's not, I realize that it's not about me. People's reaction is about them. And I think sometimes we're not taught how to handle people who are different. And it's not an obstacle anymore. It's not something that I fear. And I can share a story when I did meet my husband. I remember calling you and telling you that I hid my hand, and I consciously remember having the conversation in my head saying, do I hide my hand or do I not hide my hand? Because even in your 30s, you're still judged when you're single. So, and I remember having a conversation with him. We were having a burger, and he told me I was acting weird. And I just told him that I needed to tell him something. Here I am feeling like I'm 10 again. And I told him that I only had one hand, and he said, yeah, I know. So he knew the entire time when I thought I was hiding it. And
I'm sorry.
He said, well, it hasn't stopped you in getting anything else you want in your life, has it? I go, no. It's made you who you are, hasn't it? Well, yes. Then what's the problem? And I go, I guess I'm the problem. So I would say this, you know, I still get reactions, people still stare, and I tend to look at them and face their own, I face them and allow them to look at me to know that I know that they see me. And just acknowledge that it's okay.
That's great. That's what's been great watching you grow up in your life and how brave you are, and you just keep going through. Tell us about when you were teaching first graders or kindergartners for Teach for America. How old were you? And tell us a story about how small children are less likely to judge than adults. They're more they just don't care.
I think that I see truth in kids that is not clouded by what we create in terms of our own judgments the older we get. And I remember I was 21 years old, fresh out of college, and just moved to Arizona. And I was doing the program called Teach for America. And I taught primarily Mexican immigrants. And I remember I wanted to implement a management tool in my classroom, and it was, I was going to clap twice, and they knew to stop, look, and listen. And so I was modeling the behavior to get them to model it back to me. And I remember clapping twice and looking out, and I noticed Ricky Aguilar first and a couple other kids, and they literally had their hand in a closed fist, and they're looking at it, and they're going like this. And it was like at that moment I had just flashbacks of my entire life, of these preconceived notions that I had going on, of people's perceptions of me, that they were just modeling what I was doing.
So they were instead of like looking or staring at you, they were thinking, well, they have to imitate your stub.
Yeah, and they probably just thought I had a fist, so they were just copying me.
It's so cute.
And I think what I realized is that when I was little and kids were inquiring, asking questions, it came out so truthful when you're a kid that I thought they were making fun of me. And their questions made me uncomfortable because I was already uncomfortable. And so it almost created this snowball for the rest of my life, for a period of time. And that moment was a healing moment because it allowed me to forgive all those kids who were mean to me because they were only being truthful into their own way of knowing,
Right. So that's interesting. At that point, when you were a kid, you thought those kids were staring at you and inquiring.
I'll give you another example. When I was in kindergarten, I was told that my hand looked like a foot. And I thought that that person was making fun of me. I'm 36 years old. I live in a neighborhood and I have these great neighbors, and they have a little girl, and she's 4. And she told me the other day that my hand looked like a foot.
Are you kidding?
As a 36-year-old, it almost was. I'm still learning about those things that were recorded in my memory as hurtful, when honestly it was just an observation, and I was judging that observation and taking it so
wow,
personally.
that's amazing. What's amazing is it was a child again having that same image.
And it was probably the same age because I was
You
around
didn't tell
4 or
me
5.
that.
It must have went right over my head.
So what kind of tips would you have for others about facing fears or getting through fears?
I think that when you have a fear, and you always told me this, if something makes you uncomfortable, you should always do it more. It means that you need to grow in that area. And I think that sometimes our fear paralyzes us from growth. And I think if you take fear face on and let go, things become less scary. And all of a sudden, you ask yourself, why was I afraid to do that? And when you initially asked me to talk about fears, and you even asked my husband what I should talk about, he was like, she doesn't have any fears. And it's not that I don't have fears. I feel like I've had so much fear from such a young age that I see nothing that I can't overcome